What if the biggest barrier between a student and knowledge isn't intelligence, isn't motivation, and isn't even access to a classroom? What if it's simply the language being used to teach them? Imagine understanding the idea you're being taught, but struggling to understand the words used to explain it. For millions of learners, this isn't an unusual problem. It is part of everyday education. UNESCO reports that more than 250 million learners do not have education in the language they understand best. And UNESCO says that in some contexts, the gap is even larger. But there's something important we often miss. Language in education isn't just about translating words. It affects how a learner understands examples, instructions, questions, explanations, and even the confidence to participate. A student can know the answer and still remain silent because they are unsure how to express it. That creates a barrier that has nothing to do with their ability to learn. This is where artificial intelligence introduces a fascinating possibility. What if the same lesson could be explained instantly in the language a learner understands most naturally? At first, that sounds like simple translation, but modern AI can potentially do much more than replace one word with another. An AI learning assistant can potentially change the vocabulary, simplify an explanation, provide an analogy, generate practice questions, and adjust the difficulty of the lesson. And that matters because students don't all learn in exactly the same way. One learner may need a diagram, another may need an example, someone else may need the concept explained in simpler language. So the real question isn't whether AI can translate a lesson. The bigger question is this: can AI make knowledge easier to understand without taking the human teacher out of education? The first step is language understanding. AI systems can process spoken or written language and identify patterns that help them determine what the learner is asking. With speech recognition, spoken questions can be converted into text. That means a learner doesn't necessarily need to type a perfectly written question before asking for help. The system then tries to understand the intent behind the question, what subject is involved, what concept is being discussed, and what kind of explanation the learner appears to need. Translation can then transform the explanation into another language. But good educational translation has to preserve meaning, not simply replace words mechanically. That's important because examples also carry context. An explanation that makes immediate sense to one learner may be unfamiliar to another. AI can potentially generate alternative examples that are easier to relate to. Personalization is another major possibility. Instead of giving every learner exactly the same explanation, an AI system can potentially respond to mistakes and provide additional practice where it is needed. The process becomes a feedback loop. Ask a question, receive an explanation, attempt a problem, receive feedback, and then try again. But here's the part that matters most. None of this means the teacher becomes unnecessary. AI can make mistakes. It can misunderstand a question, produce inaccurate information, or fail to recognize cultural and educational context. The strongest model may therefore be neither teacher versus AI, nor AI replacing teachers. It may be teachers using AI to reach learners more effectively. Now imagine the same student asking the same question again, but this time, the explanation arrives in the language they understand most naturally. The system doesn't simply translate the original paragraph. It explains the concept using simpler vocabulary and a familiar example. The student can then ask another question without worrying about whether the question is perfectly written. The AI generates a short practice question based on the concept. The student gets part of the answer wrong. Instead of simply saying wrong, the system can explain where the reasoning went off track. And if that explanation doesn't work, the learner can ask for another one. But now the teacher can see something valuable. Not just whether the student got the answer right, but where the student was struggling. That creates an opportunity for the teacher to focus human attention where it matters most. The technology isn't creating intelligence. It is helping remove friction between the learner and the knowledge. AI can sound confident even when its answer is wrong. UNESCO has specifically warned about linguistic and cultural diversity, being underrepresented in AI systems. Some languages have far more digital resources than others, which can affect how well AI systems perform. A learning system may process highly personal information about a student's questions, performance, and behavior. And there is another problem. Not everyone has reliable internet or access to capable devices. UNESCO estimates that around 2.6 billion people were still offline in 2024, meaning AI could widen educational inequality if access isn't addressed. If students use AI for every answer, they may practice less independent thinking. There's a huge difference between using AI to understand a problem and using AI simply to avoid solving it. That's why responsible educational AI needs human oversight. Educational AI also needs age-appropriate design, privacy protections, and clear safeguards for younger learners. UNESCO's guidance specifically emphasizes human-centered, safe, and age-appropriate approaches to generative AI in education. The goal should not be unlimited AI in classrooms. The goal should be useful AI in the right places. Technology should remove barriers to learning, not remove the human relationship from learning. Imagine opening a lesson and choosing not only your subject, but the language and level at which you understand it best. Imagine asking a question aloud and receiving an explanation without worrying about perfect grammar. Imagine struggling with a concept at midnight and having an additional learning assistant available to explain it another way. But imagine something even more important, a teacher who understands exactly where you are struggling. That's where the future becomes interesting. AI can translate information, it can personalize explanations, it can generate practice and feedback. But humans still provide judgment, empathy, encouragement, and responsibility. Perhaps the future of education isn't a world where everyone learns from the same machine. Perhaps it's a world where technology helps every learner reach the same knowledge, regardless of the language they speak.